gebe das Wort zurück an Michael.
Vielen Dank. Mr. Godfrey Bloom, how far would you share the views of your different colleagues so far?
Absolutely not at all, any of them. I am the only radical on the committee. I also fancy myself as, after 40 years working in the City of London and investment management, rather knowing more about it than anybody else on the committee, if you'll forgive my arrogance. If I may go back to Mr. Lambert's analogy on an aeroplane, I think it was you, sir, well, I thought it was a good one. I regard banking regulation of this nature, any form of regulation, of this nature, of being an aeroplane indeed, but a concrete aeroplane. So the reason I don't turn up to committees to waste my life, of which there may not be much left, I don't know, I certainly don't intend to waste my life trying to help redraw a concrete aeroplane by moving the engines about, moving the seats about, arguing that we should have a different pilot. It is doomed to failure. We have learnt nothing from the latest crisis, I fear. We will have another banking crisis. We are bound to. It breaks a number of fundamental economic laws, of which there are few. First of all, the law of fatal conceit. The law of fatal conceit, which means that this committee feels it knows enough about banking, international banking, to regulate it, which of course is an absurdity. It means to regulate it, we would also need perfect knowledge of the market. Perfect knowledge of the market is an absurdity. How could we possibly have that in a fast-moving financial service world? We talk about retail banks, and we like to put the boot into real retail banks because we're politicians. But of course the real fault lies with central banks, not retail banks. It isn't banking bonuses that make bankers take lunatic risks. It's the knowledge that politicians will use taxpayers' money to pick up the pieces. This is your problem, not bonuses. This is why bankers act in the manner that they do. They're in a no-lose situation. They can only win. One year they get a monster bonus, and the next year the bank goes bust. Doesn't matter. They don't go to pokey. Most of the rules here are broken, should be governed by common law or statute law, not regulation. If you, and I made the point in a speech this afternoon, in the United States in 1850, if you carried out the fractional reserve banking system, i.e. you lent money that you didn't have, you would not just go to prison, you would hang. It was a criminal offence. It was a capital offence. I'd like to see that come back. We talk about LIBOR, we talk about interest rate manipulation. Well, who manipulates interest rates? It's the central banks. The central banks manipulate interest rates, and that's by buying fake junk bonds and counterfeiting money, which they call quantitative easing. And again, as I made the point this afternoon, if any of you in this audience tried that, you would go straight to prison. It's counterfeit, but we call it quantitative easing. So this is largely a problem of politics, not of banking. So this is what we really need to be dealing with. We need to be cutting away the whole banking system and starting again. We need custody banking on the one hand, so if you go and put your money into a bank, it's a custody bank, they don't lend the money on, they keep 100% of it. And so if you all knock on the door of that bank again, your money is all still there. Under fractional reserve banking, even under Basel III, even if it was 10% or even if it was 15%, you know that only 15% of your money would be there. What kind of absurd system is this? What kind of crazy, maniacal system is it, fractional reserve banking, that you know your money isn't going to be there? Now, if you want an interest coupon, you invest your money in a bank and they say to you, how long will you give it to us for? And you say 5 years. In which case they say, we will give you an interest rate coupon, we'll pay you 5%. But don't come back in under 5 years, because it won't be there, because we'll have lent it on. It's a risk assessment. You make an individual risk assessment as an individual when you lend that money. And if you're elderly and you don't want to risk money, you just want to maintain wealth, you put it in a custody bank. None of my committee members ever talk about anything practical or sensible like this, which is why I don't turn up to committee meetings. I'd sooner go to the cocktail bar. It's more fruitful.
Mrs. Ford, I believe you would like to comment on that as well.
I'd actually like to ask a question of Mr. Bloom because it's nice to see him. I think you said that you do not want taxpayers to have to bail out banks, and I think that everybody across this room would agree. And you've suggested that one of the ways to do that is to be much more transparent with how, what happens to money when you put it in a bank, and we've all asked for more transparency. And then you've also suggested two very simple reforms of sort of accounts that people could have, one of which is a bank account that doesn't get on lent, but then you don't get any interest, and then another sort of bank account where the money is on lent, so you'll get an interest coupon, but you can't have it back early. Now, here's my question. If you want banking to look like that, how are you going to make it happen? Are you going to start turning up internationally across the world to argue it across the world, or are you going to introduce capital controls to constrain it just to one country?
Sometimes, Mrs. Ford, I think you obsess on me, which is rather flattering. Look, you clearly really don't quite understand this subject, I think, and this is really what I've been saying. The point is, you have your automatic transparency. If you have a banking system like I have suggested, under statute and common law, you would see your transparency immediately under international accounting standards. Got it? Not difficult. And if you want to talk about transparency, Mrs. Ford, let's look at the ECB. We don't get any access to the minutes of the ECB. It's a complete secret. So let's start at home with transparency, shall we?
Okay. Thank you so much indeed. There was another question, please. The lady at the end, please.
Sí, Ángeles Bazán, de Radio Nacional de España.
I come from the National Radio in Spain. I'd like to know whether the European Parliament could go further in the supervision and control of banks and go back to regulate everything that was deregulated in the 80s, separating on the one hand the speculative banks, the casino banks from ordinary banks, from these serious banks which lend money, retail banks who underpin the financial system. So would you regulate speculation on food, products, stop people from buying up the whole wheat harvest or a corn harvest or a cocoa harvest in the Ivory Coast, condemning to hunger millions of people? Wouldn't you need to start regulating things like this?
Yes. Who would like to answer? Mr. Bloom, we can start. Yeah, please.
Yes, this is really a question about futures, whether it's food or whether it's commodities, it doesn't really matter. This system has been around for 400 years. If you ask farmers and food producers across the world, it means that they can sell at a fixed price before their crop grows into the ground. And so that's something that they actually welcome. It's actually a price stabilizer. It's a price stabilizer if you look at it selling forward. And it's a good thing, and it's a functional thing for economies, which is why it's been around for 400 years. If you took it away, you would get what you don't want, which is amazing fluctuations in prices, and always, as always, the poor would suffer the most. So be very careful what you wish for. You get rid of futures, and you will find things go very, very badly wrong.
Thank you. Mr. Klute.